Welcome to the Goodology Podcast, episode number 7.
Hi. Well, good for you.
How about that?
I'm impressed.
Welcome to the Goodology Podcast, an audio journey of inspiring people who have overcome obstacles and have worked to make the world a better place. This program presents stories of empowerment and positivity and helps you to answer the questions, how can I help and how can I serve? Find out these answers now and more with your host, Bernie Fallon.
Hey, welcome. It's great to be back here behind the microphone. It's a beautiful day today. In this episode, I'm speaking with Amy Cotler. Amy's a chef, and she's focused on fresh local food and sustainable agriculture. So she's written several books, and the most recent is called The Locavore Way.
The latest one is The Locavore Way, and I really wanted in that book to convey, what's behind and why bother. Why bother buying local food? Why bother eating seasonally? And then how to do it in your life and how to make sensible decisions. And to really, it's sort of like a people's version of the omnivore's dilemma, which sort of discusses some of the philosophy behind it. I really got down and dirty, like this is how to do it. This is what to think about, because I'm very interested in connection, the connection we make with people in our communities. And I think food, everyone eats.
So I thought our conversation would be based on and inspired by that book, The Locavore Way. But what emerged was the word connection. And stay tuned for that word and that theme throughout this interview. It's really cool how she talks about community, connection between people, and our earth.
I'm excited about a variation on something I've always been excited about, which is the connection between what we grow, what we eat, and how food connects us as people on this planet. And right now what I'm excited about in that context is I just spent some time in Mexico, and I really met some young people who are sort of guiding this good food generation of bringing good, healthy, delicious food to us through what they grow. Kind of working with that farm-to-table connection, which has become kind of popular these days. But when I first started at it 20 or more years ago, people kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? Dirty organic things? What's going on? But I'm really excited and energized by this new generation of kids.
The kid that Amy refers to in Mexico is named Geneva Gray. Now, Geneva grew up in West Stockbridge, where I grew up and where Amy lived, and it's in a county called the Berkshires. So we'll refer to the Berkshires here and there throughout this discussion. But in Mexico, Amy ran into Geneva Gray, and Geneva has an organic farm cafe, which is really cool. So we talk a little bit about the contrast between Mexico and growing and the Berkshires, where it's really cold and growing. And since I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, I thought I would open up the discussion talking about the weather. Freezing up there.
Yeah, and it is. It's freezing here. I'm doing well. The winter is, it's a long haul. Even though I go to Mexico in the winter, I still have no right to complain. The 1 month seems to have not taken the edge off this year. It's pretty brutal, and it's easy to let it bring you down. But I'm working on it.
What's it like today?
Today it is, I don't know, we've got like a couple of feet of snow outside, and but it's a little melty now, which is good because we had a slightly warm few days, and bright and sunny. I mean, the sun is streaming through my living room like I have to shield my eyes to look at the computer, but I refuse to pull the blinds down because I'm so happy to see it.
And when you go outside, you need sunglasses because of the snow and the bright.
Well, I prefer not to even wear them. I'm just dying to just look into the sun right now.
It's kind of a gateway to positive energy. So can you just give me 3 things that would follow the words I like for you?
I like being connected to people in my community. I like family and friends, and I like food.
You like being connected to people in your community, family and friends, and food. Awesome. Oh, well, that opens the door for what we're going to talk about today.
Great.
Now, I like expanded would be, a burst that I like. What are you really excited about? What are you passionate about in your life?
Well, things woof and weave a little bit, but right now, I'm excited about a variation on something I've always been excited about, which is the connection between what we grow, what we eat, and how food connects us as people on this planet. And right now, what I'm excited about in that context is I just spent some time in Mexico, and I really met some young people who are sort of guiding this good food generation of bringing good, healthy, delicious food to us through what they grow. Kind of working with that farm-to-table connection, which has become kind of popular these days. But when I first started at it 20 or more years ago, people kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? Dirty organic things? What's going on? But I'm really excited and energized by this new generation of kids that are coming up in this good food generation and bringing us more delicious, wonderful food and connecting with their communities through it.
Well, what are they doing and how does it work?
Well, we were just talking about Geneva before, Geneva Gray. These particular kids, I call them kids, they're in their 30s, so they are not kids. But these particular folks I'm talking about are working in San Miguel in Mexico, and I work with many farmers in New England, and so this was more of a new thing for me. And they're growing good organic food. They're developing ways for people who are in need to grow food cheaply for their families. They're introducing non-chemically ridden foods to their communities, like, bacon that's, cured naturally. They're growing their own animals, and they're sharing how to do urban farming, vegetable farming in areas where they just have terraces and little baby backyards, people can grow their own foods, and they're really spreading their education about that, as well as trying to make a living doing it. And they're integrating their values into their life in a way that's not, it's not self-important. It's just exciting, fun, and interesting.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. Now, what about in the Berkshires?
Well,
you live where it's cold, and it's harder to do that.
The Berkshires is tough. I mean, over the last 20 years, the Berkshires has really led the way in many ways in sustainable ag, but we have a really, gruesome growing season. But there are ways around it. Cheese, meat, beverages, like cider and stuff. There's ways to eat from small sustainable farms during the winter, not to make it the only part of your diet, but to integrate it into your diet that really support local farmers and are possible. It is a long haul. You are right, during the winter. But it is possible. I'm excited about the Berkshires because the Berkshires has been in the forefront for so many years of really smart, innovative farmers, starting with, the first I can think of offhand is Robin Van An, who's really the mother of the CSA movement, where she developed community-supported farms, the first of two actually, but she really developed the method to spread to other farmers about how to share the harvest with the community and for them to buy in to her harvest on a weekly basis and take some of the risk from her at the beginning of the season by paying her and then getting a share in the season of the harvest all season long, and they go and pick their own, etc. And the Berkshires in general is kind of a cool, innovative place for a rural area. It has many influences. Berkshires, which is a local currency, which is a kind of a radical thing. She's on their $1 bill, and because she really championed, she's deceased now, but she really championed the idea that small, sustainable farmers who grow things in an organic or even if it's not certified organic, biodynamic, organic style of growing can really sort of change their communities. And it's true, they have.
Can you tell me her name again?
Robin Van An.
Okay.
And there's a Robin Van An Institute where you can find other CSAs, Robin Van An Center rather, where you can find other CSAs in your area, and you can sign on for them. I mean, the burgeoning of farmers markets. I came of age as a chef, really excited about food. At the same time, the farmers movement came of age. And I'm very lucky in that respect. I started visiting farmers markets, and I started to realize that you can shine food and you can make towering infernos of beautifully sauced, gorgeous things. But what really matters is where the food came from and what it tastes like and how fresh it is. And it really cooks itself when it's that great. And that's really kind of come into the mainstream of thinking now. But when I first started acting that way, I had been a caterer in New York City before I moved to the Berkshires. It seemed kind of a radical thing to think, because certainly as a chef, I wasn't trained that way. I was trained to take food, regular old commodity food, and just make it tasty. Whereas I like to work from the inside out, as many chefs do these days, really taking food that has life in it, it has spirit in it,
Right.
and make it shine. Just, surround it with whatever it needs to make it shine. And I think people can make the difference. I'm also excited about the concept of food democracy. I don't like the idea that fresh local farm food should only be available to those who can pay a little more. So I've gotten involved with the farm to school movement. And I worked with the state of Massachusetts to develop a cookbook for food service folks so that they could serve recipes. And I had a partner who connected them up with farmers. They could serve recipes using seasonal fresh food. And boy, the kids can taste the difference, and they can taste the life in the food too. So I'm excited about that as well.
Excellent. There's several things I want to get to with you, like some of the benefits of local farming and sustainable agriculture. I want to talk about your book, The Locavore Way, and Berkshire Grown, and other things. Like the last time I saw you, you were talking about kind of looking ahead to retirement and wondering, what you would do. You said you were hippies that, kind of want to live a little more free lifestyle, and get into that. Can you tell me first where you grew up and then how you got to the Berkshires?
Well, I grew up in the burbs in about 20 miles north of the city, Manhattan. I grew up in the suburbs, and my father was a freelance writer, and my mom was a potter, and she's still a ceramicist, and she makes jewelry. They were kind of exiles from New York who moved to the suburbs during the big burgeoning time of everyone moving to the suburbs, and that's where I grew up. And as soon as I got old enough, I moved to the city. And spent a great deal of time there. I had sort of fled to the Berkshires earlier in my early 20s with the, back to the land movement, and discovered pretty quickly that I really wasn't a farmer, that I was interested in food and I was interested in cooking food, but not so much in farming. And I have such respect for farmers. They do what I can't do. Even having a garden makes everyone respect farmers. So I moved back to the city. I became a chef. I had a catering business. I taught cooking. I developed recipes for a lot of places. Joy of Cooking, Better Homes of Garden. I was have recipe developer, will travel type. And I work with the loft tenants movement there, helping artists in my neighborhood really develop their rights to stay in their loft. So I've always been kind of political. And what's great about the local food movement is brought together my interest in social justice and food, because the local food movement is about that. So I moved to the Berkshires, back to the Berkshires with my husband, who I met in the city, and I helped found an organization, Berkshire Grown, which was one of the early initiatives, farm to table initiatives in the country, and certainly early in the Northeast, really connecting up farmers, consumers, and food buyers, professional food buyers like restaurateurs, and working with some really smart and interesting people like Robin Van Ann, like my friend Kathy Roth, who worked for the UMass Extension, who I'm still quite close with. And that's what we really worked on. We worked on the farm table consumer connection. And within 3 years, we got restaurants to buy 50% more local farm foods. We helped it was the right time as much as anything. Sometimes you can work and nothing happens as an activist, but if you got the right time and the right place, it all comes together, and there's so much you can't control, which is frustrating for someone like me. But if you understand that you're also working with these forces of time and fashion and the way people feel at different times in history, sometimes you hit it. And I was very lucky in that respect. Not everyone is lucky in that way. And I've since worked for national organizations like the Chefs Collaborative, doing other kinds of work that is similar. And I wrote, a whole bunch of cookbooks, but the latest one is The Locavore Way. And I really wanted in that book to convey, what's behind and why bother. Why bother buying local food? Why bother eating seasonally? And then how to do it in your life, and how to make sensible decisions, and to really, it's sort of like a people's version of the omnivore's dilemma, which sort of discusses some of the philosophy behind it. I really got down and dirty, like, this is how to do it, this is what to think about, because I'm very interested in connection, the connection we make with people in our communities. And I think food, everyone eats. Everyone eats. Everyone of every, any political persuasion, we all eat. And our connection to our food is really important, where our food comes from.
One of the things you talked about was why do it in your book.
Yeah.
And when you were a chef, when you were younger, how much did you see of what you do now? Do you know what I mean? Certainly you were you wanted to promote positive things, and but what did you see of what your life is now back then?
Well, certainly a lot less. I mean, as I said, the farmers markets came into being, and I saw the beginning of interest in that kind of food. But no, not so much. I see people buy, a truck pulls into a restaurant, a trailer truck load of food pulls in, you make a call, you get the truckload of food, you unload it. Who knows where it came from? Right. This is food that is, not always that fresh. It's traveled long distances. It's taken a lot of fossil fuel to produce. Right. And it's probably been sprayed to death. And if you look at those huge commodity farms, you see that the soil is like, dust. I try to look on the positive rather than the negative side, which is one of the reasons we resonate with each other, which is that, I could talk to death about the evils of the food system, how broken it is. And I think there are a lot of wonderful people doing that. I'm interested at this point more in talking about what people can do to make a difference that's positive. So I'm sorry I lost the question because I got carried away.
Well, you're doing good. I wanted to hear some of the reasons why people would eat this way and what the benefits are and whether people can feel better or understand that they're doing a better thing for our world.
Well, I think that there's lots of reasons. The reason that got me in being a chef is taste. Fresh food that's been freshly picked is just astoundingly wonderful. Okay, so you can start from there. Supporting your local businesses, whether they're farmers or other businesses, help boost your local community. These people are your neighbors, even if they're your regional neighbors. Supporting farmers that grow things in sustainable ways, you're supporting a healthier environment for us and also for the future and our children. So you're supporting biodiversity, and that's very, very important. You're also supporting a healthy working landscape. So if you think about a healthy landscape as numerous things, you're thinking about it as cities, as countries, as suburbs, with clean rivers and clean air, with affordable housing. And if you support a varied landscape, you can preserve land, which is important to do, but you also want to preserve the working landscape, which are our farms. So that's part of the reason. Also, to preserve our cultural heritage. Certainly those of us who lived in the country for many years, and you who grew up in the country, understand this is part of our cultural heritage, our farms. So when our farms disappear, part of us disappears in our history.
Right.
So that's certainly, so those are some of the many reasons.
And then the fossil fuels to get it from point A to point B.
Exactly. Also, there's something about the connection you make going to a farmer's market. I'm so interested in community. Community is just an expanded version of family, right? So the connections we make, they're like the new town green. You imagine maybe we put Vaseline on our lens and look through it and think the old times were better. Maybe they weren't. But I like to think that in the old days, people knew each other in small towns and helped each other out. Well, the farmers markets have a bit of a feeling of that. When you know the people who grow your food, it adds meaning and depth to the food you eat. And so that when I know that I bought my corn, from Bruce Howden or from Dan Tazinski at Taft Farms, and I know his story, and I met his brother. So when I eat that corn, it means more to me. It's not disenfranchised. We live in this world where everything is just floating heads and machinery. And I'm not a Luddite. I think some of the technology is great, but that kind of connection is part of the reason I like to eat local food.
There was a lady who, I'm sure you remember, it was Armida Dinello at Troy's Garage.
Oh, yeah.
And she used to, when she come into the store, and she told me that when she was younger, they would go out in the back and get a chicken, and that would be their dinner.
That's right.
And so, so the chicken there, doesn't have the hormones and that didn't travel to get from point A to point B. And there's so many benefits of that. And of course, they had a garden right out in their backyard.
Yeah, exactly. And this year I'm joining a community garden, and because I've moved to Northampton, I'm which is about an hour away from the Berkshires, and I'm very excited about it because I've always had my own backyard garden since I lived in the country, and I'm really excited about gardening with other people.
So you live in Northampton now?
I do.
I noticed that there was some events going on in Northampton. I want to ask you a question. I saw this one time, and I could never find it again. I think someone like maybe Wayne Dyer or someone pointed this out. And it was said that if you grow vegetables in your backyard and you're the one that's, planting and tending to those vegetables, the vegetables will grow in a way that feeds a deficiency that you may have in your body. Have you ever heard that?
Well, I certainly believe that we're organisms that are part of this planet. I don't know the science of that,
Okay.
But it doesn't seem unrealistic to me.
Yeah, and I thought that was really cool, but I couldn't find anything. I researched it. I couldn't even remember who said it. I think maybe it was a woman like Marianne Williamson, but I'm not sure. Okay, and I just wondered if you knew that. One of the things. Go ahead.
I'm not, I'm a chef, so I'm not, super on the science end, and I don't have a natural proclivity for it. But I do know certainly you can taste the life in food that is fresh and freshly grown, and I do know that that food that's grown organically, is different, is scientifically different, and our bodies have to metabolize it differently. But beyond that, there are many more experts than me.
Yeah. Well, you said something that triggered a word in my mind, which is genetically modified food. What do you think of that?
Well, again, I'm not a scientist, but genetically modified food frightens me.
Right.
I don't know, how could I put this more articulately? Look, genetically modified food is banned in many parts of the world, like Europe and Japan, okay? And it's legal here. So what does that mean? It means that the almighty buck is more important here than the health of the consumer. Now, why is it banned in Europe? Is it just arbitrarily banned? We've always fooled with Mother Nature because we've hybridized things since the beginning of time. Certainly corn is a hybridized beast, but there's levels of hybridization, and there's also levels of corporations working to really monopolize our food source. And that GMO foods are a lot about that. It's a lot about people wanting to own our food. And when you think about how many people in the world harvest their seeds, and that's how they grow, that's how they farm, and many GMO foods don't produce their own seeds, it's really about capitalism.
Right.
In the worst sense of the word. There are things about capitalism that work, and there are things about capitalism that bring out the worst in us.
One of the things I talk about in Goodology, a kind of a tagline, is the greatest currency. And that currency is your inner energy, that energy flow, positive excitement, happiness, passion, which leads to relationships and connections and family and love. And that is the currency that I talk about. So when that's the greatest currency, we live a more healthy life. When you serve another currency, which is money, you can sacrifice that.
I completely agree with you. And I also really strongly believe, and it's one of the reasons I got involved with the local food movement, is working from the bottom up rather than from the top down. And I think we think alike this way, in
Very
that,
important.
small acts build. And some of the greatest things that have happened in this country, the most positive things that have happened in this country, have happened from people just banding together as working people to make a difference, rather than everything coming from the top up. And I'm not down, and I'm not saying that things can't happen from the top down, but the energy that bubbles up can be huge.
Right. And I think ultimately the most powerful, because that's where you're building the strongest foundation.
Yes.
I have a chapter in my book called The Beauty of Problems. And it basically means that if there is a problem, don't cry and whine about it, don't avoid it, but embrace it. And when you do embrace the problem, something greater happens. There's really a synergistic effect. Now, thinking about that phrase, the beauty of problems, can you think of a time where that would have applied in your life?
Wow, I am kind of a plunger. Like if I see a problem, I'm not somebody who In fact, it drives my husband crazy because he says, sometimes you just have to say, it's a problem. And, and I'm always going to fix, which is not always great. Sometimes you can wait things out and things get better.
And can you think of a time where you did something else for someone and they really appreciate it? Kind of their eyes lit up and go, wow, that was nice. And you saw that emotion in them.
Well, this is what I love about food. I mean, what is food about? And when you give people food, it's a universal language of joy, and that you feed them something tasty, they eat it, they light up. It's not abstract even in the most remote way. I think about my dad, who died of Parkinson's, and he had just a terrible death. And he really lost it by the end, and he was such a sharp guy, and he really lost his mind by the end. But he was crazy for ice cream. And it's one of the few things that stayed with him was his passion for ice cream. In fact, his last words were ice cream. But I brought him, every time I visited him, I used to bring him 3 little, he barely recognized me. Sometimes he didn't recognize. I brought him 3 little flavors of ice cream, little samples of Haagen-Dazs, and he would taste them. And because he had no memory anymore, they were all new to him.
Oh,
so
wow.
he tasted the chocolate. He tasted the strawberry it was, because strawberry was his favorite flavor. And he tasted it and he said, "This is incredible." Like a little child who would taste something, And I was filled, with, it was sadness and love simultaneously, And I thought, I was able to bring this person who had no joy, who I loved, something wonderful in such a simple way. I mean, in such a simple way. So I think of food that's just one example, but
that's a great example.
Countless times when food has lit up the most miserable person.
Wow.
And it does that, particularly when it's, it's cooked with love and well flavored and made with good stuff.
And now I can see what you're saying sometimes with fresh food. I remember we lived next to the family that had 12 kids, and they had a big garden in the backyard, and we'd go up into their garden and have a raw tomato right out of the garden.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. And I can see that, especially someone that hasn't had that before or hasn't had that in a while, if you give them some kind of fresh food, their eyes light up and go, wow.
Yeah, I loved, one of the things I loved about parenthood was introducing my daughter to all kinds of things. I mean, we used to, plant peas, and she'd push the little peas into the ground, and we'd watch them come up, and they would turn into sugar snaps a few months later. And she would see the magic of that happening, and eating those sugar snaps. They never even hit the kitchen, because they were eaten by the time they got to the kitchen. And sharing that joy and sharing the seasonal joys with her of, late spring is the time for strawberry picking at Ioka Valley Farm, and then Windy Hill for apples, and in October.
And blueberries around August.
Exactly. And the rhythms of the season. I mean, that's one of the things I love about the local food movement is connecting to nature and to the cycles of nature in that way, and sharing that joy.
I like that your daughter could see the food growing out there. Here in the city, I'm in Phoenix right now, and I go volunteer at a school. It's pavement. It's a quarter of a slice of pizza for lunch. It's really difficult. And to see that, it really promotes life.
Well, you should look into urban farming, because I bet you somewhere in Phoenix there's some interesting urban farming going on, and it would be interesting to connect up to that. It's a real movement right now. One of the things
urban farming,
that's right.
Okay.
One of the things, like people doing beehives on rooftops and things like that, or growing herbs. I remember when I was a caterer in Manhattan, kids in the South Bronx, that was just banged up place, growing herbs on their, making a business of growing herbs on rooftops and really interesting things. One of the things that occurs to me is we talk about goodology, and I have no idea if it's off topic or not, that, people think when you do things that are quote unquote good, that you're selfless. And I don't think it's about selflessness. I very much don't think that. I've been, some people say, people who do these things, they're sanctimonious, or they're selfish, or this or that. And I say quite the opposite. I say that I do things that connect me with community, that feel good in the community, because it gives me something back. And
Right.
that without doing it, I'm an empty pot. I mean, so if I don't do it, it doesn't, I mean, there is a selfish element in this. It doesn't mean the results aren't great or can't be great, but there's a selfish element. Those of us who do things in the community that bring some better life to the community, do them in part because it helps fulfill us. And I think that that's important for people to understand, that they get so much back.
They get so much back, and I can see where it triggers your excitement. It makes you feel good. It makes your blood bubble a little more. Your energy is flowing.
Oh yeah,
so it serves you.
Exactly, like I was down in Mexico, talking to people my age who are retired and this and that, and people redoing their kitchens. Nice people, good people, really good people. But then I start talking to people who are doing things in the community that relate to sustainable food and relate to growing, and I get really excited, and it brings me alive. So
Wow.
I think that's true for you. It's true for me. It's true for so many of us who connection to good things, to positive things, enlivens our lives.
Wonderful. I want to ask you just a couple more questions. One is, who's your greatest influence?
Oh, God. I don't think I could say I have one great influence. I really can't.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I don't have like one, I'm not a guru type. Certainly I've been influenced by people, like Alice Waters and Michael Pollan and people like that. But I would say those people have influenced me in many ways. But my greatest influence, I would say, certainly would be family and friends, and the connections I make with them. And certainly, one of those is Kathy Roth, who was the UMass Extension person,
Right.
who was one of the founders of Berkshire Grown. And she was a great influence on me because she understood what we were doing in a larger context. She's a very political person, and she helped run these study groups we did, which were just unbelievably cool, which we did during the winter. We spent 6 weeks studying aspects of the food system, food culture, delivery, finances, all the aspects of the food system. And we broke up into little groups and we studied them for 6 weeks. And then we came together, and that was really helped form the basis of some of what we did at Berkshire Grown. And she had these amazing ideas. Apparently that's what they do in Sweden to inform public policy during the winter. They have these study groups. But she really helped me understand how really empowering people to speak with their voices, even quiet voices, could help form a movement. And her political attitude very much influenced me, in that she could work a room in this amazing way where quiet people who were thoughtful could speak out, people who were active and excited could speak out, and everybody could be heard. So she very much influenced me in terms of sort of community organizing in that respect. Certainly,
it's a gentle strength. Yeah.
Exactly. And certainly my mother, in terms of, man, could she cook.
Everything that we've talked about today is just a huge positive influence in the world and moving in the right direction, and I feel a better direction. And it's just a beautiful world. You travel, you see, I'm looking outside right now, the sky is blue, the trees are green, and it's wonderful out there. The temperature here is excellent. But there are things that we can improve on. In answering the question, how to make the world a better place, can you just share a few words?
Well, I don't know if I have any insight whatsoever on how to make the world a better place. I can't pretend that I have any insight on that, but I can say that when people connect with each other in a real and honest way, it's a good beginning. And that for me, what's been resonated most with me is connecting through food, which everybody enjoys, everybody eats, and good food grown well by people who care about the environment, who produce tasty, delicious food that we share together. And sharing that food together as friends and family is a great way to build community and to build a positive community.
I'm glad you summarized it that way, because one of the things that's emerged here for me is the sense of connection and community. You, Amy, can talk about food and the specifics of food for a long time, but the real energy and the real life is the connection and community, rather than just living in a box. The excitement is connection.
Absolutely. I really do believe that.
And how about just a quick summary of The Locavore Way, which is your most recent book?
Yes, the Locavore Way is really a people's guide to eating locally and seasonally. And it takes you from how to procure it, how to shop for it, how to cook it, how to have a garden and be active in your community if you'd like to. But the main focus of the book is how to find local food and how to savor it and enjoy it seasonally. And it really is a very practical guide on how to do that. It's got a lot of resources in it. It answers a lot of questions that people have, about raw milk versus commodity milks, different kinds of meat, labeling. It has stories about farmers, about communities in it. It integrates into some of that practical advice, and it's just jam-packed with information that's easy to read and access.
So it's a resource that everyone should read. I think that a lot of people would look and go, oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Exactly. I think that the newbie, people who are just unfamiliar with the whole idea of local food, and even the more experienced locavore, someone who eats seasonally and locally, can get something from it. I really do. I worked hard on it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you did. I hope it's doing tremendously well.
Oh, thank you.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is that I mentioned the last time that I talked to you, you were thinking ahead to retirement, and it was just really exciting to me that you had planned on, being a little more mobile and living in a place where you probably could afford a little more in retirement. So you talked about, Mexico and living, but you're connected up here in Massachusetts. What's the future look like for you?
Well, it's hard to know, but we recently downsized. We lived in an 1810 house for about 30 years in West Stockbridge, and mostly of that time, 30 years. The first few years we were repairing it and living in New York, and it was kind of...
Your house was built in 1810?
Yeah, it was. Well,
wow.
Around then, we don't know because they're not exact records, but about then,
yeah.
It was a wreck when we bought it, a complete wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And we had no idea what we were getting into. It was quite a project. And we recently downsized. Our my daughter Emma's been out of the house for 6 years now, and we really didn't need to be in a house and to have all that stuff. And we got rid of half of what we owned, which was hard, but actually very joyous. Ultimately, it's just stuff. And
freeing.
A barn. You have barns, fill up.
Yeah, I have one of those.
We moved into an apartment, a lovely apartment on the second floor of a Victorian house on Crescent Street in Northampton. And my husband's got a few more years of teaching. We're hoping a year and a half, and we hope to hit the world. We'd like to travel the world, on a budget, but travel the world for 6 months to a year and really expose ourselves to things while we're still ambulatory and able to travel and enjoy things, and really go outside of our comfort zone and outside of our box. And then we hope to settle in Mexico. My husband grew up in Mexico, so we can afford to live there. It's less expensive. The community we're moving to, San Miguel, is a huge expat community. So I wouldn't call it typical of Mexico, but it has some wonderful features to it. It's quite beautiful. And I've already gotten to know some wonderful people there who are working in the sustainable food world, including somebody who grew up in West Stockbridge, who you know as well, who has a food there called the Good Food Cafe. She sells wonderful food.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad too. She's a wonderful person, Geneva Gray, and somebody who's a biodynamic farmer, and I've gotten to know some really exciting people there. So we're going to be relocating down there. I doubt I'll be sitting and eating bonbons down there. I'm sure I'll be doing something fun and interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, that put a smile on my face, and just you in general. Every time that I would see you, because you have such a bright smile and personality, you always put a smile on my face. So I appreciate you spending time with me today,
well,
Amy.
I so appreciate you saying that, because sometimes it isn't easy. So I appreciate it. It's nice to know that I put smile on people's faces.
All right, and that was my interview with Amy Cotler. Visit our website at www.goodology.com for the show notes and pretty much everything that we talked about. You'll find a link there, a link to her books, a link to the people we talked about, and visit and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Goodology. Thank you and have a great day.